So here we are again, heeding the cries of your children. It is so important in this time. Today is, I think, April 27th, 2020. And it's quite a moment in history we're living in. And a lot of children are crying. A lot of children are crying. So Sharon Raji Maynard here. I think this is heeding the children. That might be number 5. Chapter 6, Plans. Rory opened the door before Pam had a chance to knock. They both laughed at her surprise. He stood in the frame as the door swung away. "Come on in," he laughed and reached for her hand. "I saw you coming up the path. I guess I was a little quick." Rory laughed. "Jerry is in the kitchen fixing something to drink." He turned back to the driveway as Bob came up the path. "Hi, Bob. Thanks for coming over. How was the drive?" "Actually, quite easy today," Bob responded. "I decided to leave work early and missed all the rush hour traffic. We've had a great afternoon." The two men followed Pam to the kitchen. Jerry met them with tall glasses of freshly squeezed lemonade over ice. They all sat in the living room while they drank, talked, and relaxed. Rory looked at Jerry. "Was now a good time to break the news?" his eyes asked. She smiled back. "You know, you two are our dearest friends," began Jerry. "We're so glad that you're in our lives." She walked over and sat on the stool by Rory. "We have some news we want to share with you before we start on the children's projects," Rory continued. "Don't say another word, let me guess," spoke up Pam. She stood and hummed softly, moving her hands around each one of them, pretending to explore energy. Bob smiled at Pam's antics. Jerry and Rory snuggled closer, as if combining their energy, she would get the message. She knelt in front of them and shook their hands. "It seems as if there's a new one on the way," she proclaimed. "Wow, you're good," joked Rory. "And what do you think our new one will be, boy or girl?" "No, no," exclaimed Jerry, jumping up. "That's our surprise." Pam hugged first Jerry and then Rory. "I am so happy for you." "Does this mean I will be an aunt?" she asked. "Of course," returned Jerry. "Isn't it just wonderful? We are as happy as little kids on Christmas morning. I've had a hard time not just blurting it out." Bob joined the merriment, first shaking Rory's hand and then hugging Jerry. "This is a big step. When's the little one due?" "As close as we can tell, it will be the last part of January. Maybe a little Aquarian babe," replied Jerry. Did I mention that we're really, really happy?" she said, squeezing Rory's hand. Bob looked at Pam and smiled. What fantastic news, his eyes said. Love and joy fairly danced around the room. He took a sip of his lemonade with a satisfied look on his face. Bob and Rory grinned at each other. "Oh, what the heck," laughed Rory. "Group hug." And all 4 friends created a circle with their arms and swayed in celebration of love, life, and of each other. Chapter 7, Time Alone. Bob sat by Pam's side as they dangled their feet in the water. Pam was unusually quiet today. Bob sat silently, knowing that her attention was in another world. He noticed the meadow beyond the stream aglow with violet mountain lupins and yellow sulfur flowers. The sun was bright, the sky clear. The breeze caught the cool of the water and shared it with the couple by the shore. Bob loved nature. Its beauty gave him the most profound peace. He lay on his back, his mind drifting with the clouds. Time slipped away, and even Pam's presence faded. He thought of Todd Liebecker, the teen from Glacier Park. Eventually, Todd's behavior had been disturbing from a very young age. His family had sensed problems and had looked for answers. Their religious leaders had suggested more love, stronger moral guidelines. Counselors talked about his social environment, suggested family counseling, and prescribed drugs. Over the years, his parents saw some progress, but they were always walking on eggshells, waiting for the next shoe to drop. And then the most significant shoe imaginable fell at Glacier Park. Questions filled his mind, questions he would never be able to pursue or explore in his role as a lawyer, but questions he wanted to ask. He felt a slight stirring and opened his eyes. Pam was looking around. She leaned over and kissed him lightly. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she asked. "Yes, and so are you," he replied as he gazed into her beautiful azure eyes. "What more could we ask?" Pam smiled and then scanned the horizon. "You know, when a person is in harmony with nature, they feel no stress, no anger, no shame. Nature washes away the chaos. A person can simply relax and become that harmony," Bob spoke. "Well, I know very few families who have incorporated nature into their lives." Instead, they carry too many shoulds, dissatisfactions, and busyness, with little or no time for sitting still. Can you imagine society's view of daily rock sitting, or hourly river dipping, or even regular tree hugging? Pam giggled at Bob's words, and he enjoyed her delight in the thought. "I have some questions," Bob ventured. "About what?" "Well, you know Todd Liebecker, the teen at Glacier Park?" "Yes," replied Pam. "Have you ever explored the underlying causes for the behavior of children like him with your spiritual teachers?" I haven't done in-depth asking since I haven't had one as a client. I know that each situation is unique, but I also find that the information from one client gives me some beginning ideas for the next. What applies to one does not necessarily apply to all, but I find many similarities. Would you be willing to look into it and see what we can discover about him and the situation? Sure. When would you like to do that? What about now? Bob said. I knew you would say that, Pam giggled. I'm as curious as you are. Actually, having you here with your questions will help me consider things that otherwise I may not have thought about. But I'd like to move to another spot, Pam continued. That place in the little grove of pines would be perfect. Bob pulled Pam to her feet, and they gathered up their shoes and backpacks. Bob reached for Pam's free hand as they strolled through the grass and carefully stepped around some thistles. The enclosed grove proved a beautiful space. Pam opened her backpack to retrieve her ever-present stones, pendulum, notebook, and pen. Let's look at the possible reasons. Like, was it a personal issue within Todd's field, or a trigger from a global cycle of influence, or a result of some contract agreed to before birth? Let's begin with a possibility that it's an issue-based situation, something personal to him. And that would mean that this young boy had some accumulation of personally created violent energy that erupted from the sheer weight of it, what some would call karma, Pam began. Bob listened carefully, asking questions as they arose. They spent the next 2 hours discussing and asking questions of Pam's spiritual teachers. Bob watched Pam as she meditated, listened, and wrote. He had been a careful observer in his interactions with Pam. He was watching to see her values, her attitudes and behaviors, and had liked all that he had seen so far. As he watched her in her work mode, he saw a glow throughout her being and a twinkle in her eye. His heart sang in response. Bob was so comfortable in Pam's presence, so trusting of her integrity. He knew that this woman was the one he had seen in his dreams. He had been waiting for her. By the end of the day, they had answers. Through understanding the particulars of Todd and his violent actions at Glacier Park, they had new insight. They could use these ideas in evaluating disturbing behaviors in other children. And Bob had seen enough to convince him that Pam was all he had wanted in a life partner. His love for her swelled into deep commitment, and he felt elated. Pam chatted as they gathered their things. Holding hands, they walked to his car. Both changed from this time together. Chapter 8, Baby Prep. Jerry and Rory had asked Pam to work with them in preparing for their new baby from a spiritual perspective of life purpose and intentional living. It seemed like an affirmation of their choices that just when Rory had committed to follow his desire to make a real difference in the lives of children and families, he and Jerry discovered their family beginning. Their work for the children took on greater significance with their impending parenthood. After their discussion with Pam and Bob about the importance of resolving negative patterns as parents, they wanted to explore their issues before welcoming a baby into their lives. What tendencies, old injuries, sabotaging patterns could be part of the genetic package that would be passed down to this little one? What family traits and unresolved negative seeds were lying dormant? What were the plans that this little one had laid regarding the negativity, and what new dreams were planned? Jerry and Rory were aware that decorating the nursery with bright colors of yellow, blue, and red, and whimsical animal designs was only a small part of preparing a welcoming space for their child. It was the physical piece, and they loved the activity. However, they both wanted to make more profound preparations. They drove to Pam's clinic, excited to be including spiritual awareness and transformation for their child. The warm air blew through the passenger window onto Jerry's face. As she leaned back, relaxed and content, Rory glanced at her and thought he had never seen anyone more beautiful. He turned the corner and pulled up in front of Pam's office. In the past, the office had been a family home. Pam and Bob had spent hours scraping, patching, and painting. Now it was clothed in shades of light green paint, vibrant forest green trim, and a rich rust-colored accent around the doors, windows, and front porch. The flowers Pam had planted transformed the front yard into a virtual rainbow of color. A new brick walk led up the front stairs, and a large covered porch welcomed clients. Pam had painted her logo and office hours on what had once been a family's window to the world. Jerry and Rory opened the door and walked in. A tiny bell sounded to notify Pam of their presence. She was waiting. They hugged in greeting, and then Pam ushered them into a small room. A large framed picture of a high mountain meadow hung on one wall. Smaller pictures sprinkled around it. Against the wall by the door stood a tall bookcase with books, stones, shells, and pine cones. There were several comfortable chairs. Pam's creativity and warmth filled this room. Pam motioned for them to find their favorite place to sit. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, and Rory noticed by her manner that she was wearing her professional hat. Rory and Jerry looked at each other. Rory spoke up. "No, we just finished lunch, so we're okay." "Great," said Pam. "Let's get right down to business. Now you both know why you're here. It's a joint adventure. You're pretty much aware of the principles of my work, right? She laughed. So let's start with what you desire from our work together. What do you want to gain? Jerry began. Well, we believe that each soul comes to the opportunity of an earth life with a unique plan. Part of the plan is to address some negative patterns. We'd like to transform as much of our own and our baby's negative patterns as we can. Much of the pain I see in my practice is a result of childhood trauma or neglect. Using common psychological methods of addressing the problems takes many years. I see clients whose lives were consumed with constant attention to old wounds. We want something different for our child, added Rory. Then he continued, since working with you, I see that problems go back lifetimes or even beyond into the greater unconscious group psyche. Having seen the healing power that your tag work adds, we want that greater clarity for our baby. Especially, we want to make sure that the DNA codes, the circuitry system, and the wiring are correct. Sounds great to me. Just what I have prepared, Pam said, and then continued. Souls coming into earth life at this time have no need to live out the patterns of pain and abuse. They will bring in patterns that can only be acknowledged and released within a physical experience. Even though the distorted trauma and fear-based energy patterns our children may have created, lived, or inherited are theirs to resolve, parents can act as surrogates to begin corrections, even before birth, and certainly during early childhood. It's possible to change as many as the child's higher self allows. The DNA and wiring are definitely something we'll address. The crippling need not remain in any of our children. And what better place to correct the crippled blueprint and begin eliminating negative energy for them than in the womb before it manifests in a physical way. That's what we want, said Rory. Another valuable gift will be to create possibilities for him with the reality shift work. Pam looked up, surprised, as the words slipped out as to the sex of their baby. Oh, that was an interesting slip, she laughed. Well, we both think it's a boy, smiled Jerry. Just feels right for some reason. Well, let's say he then, if that's okay with you two, said Pam. It's certainly better than saying him, her, and they all laughed. We're fine with that, said Rory, looking at Jerry, who nodded back. So the reality shift work will play a major role in your preparation for him, for you, and for your home environment. Pam was moving them right along. As you define and clarify your way of relating to each other, to children, and to the larger world, your energy will attract a soul that is ready for what you offer. Instead of just inviting any soul, you invite with greater clarity. He will be able to decide if your home, lifestyle, and intentions give the best environment for what he needs to accomplish. Jerry and Pam were holding hands as Pam talked. Jerry and Rory were holding hands as Pam talked. Their excitement was apparent as they caressed fingertips and squeezed each other's hands. First, the baby program intends to create a space of neutrality from which a new picture of parenthood can emerge. From that created space, we'll watch for action steps. Does that sound good to you? Pam asked. Great, said Rory, and Jerry nodded her agreement. All right, here is the plan, Pam said as she slid a folder toward each of them. Jerry and Rory looked at the outline in Pam's workbooks. Rory read from the top, and the assignments began. Contemplate and write how you view your mom and dad. Also, how they define you. Number 2. Why do you want to have a child? Number 3. What qualities do you want to exhibit as a partner and as a parent? Describe the environment you intend for your home. Identify what you as a parent want to offer your child? He scanned the rest of the outline, smiling as he read. Wow, that's quite an in-depth process, Rory volunteered. This should set us in good stead for being parents. Well, I tried to think of everything, laughed Pam. So let's get started, she said as she pushed the two workbooks and the pens for the workbooks toward them. Open to page 1. Now you have the whole office and garden to yourself. The pages are pretty self-explanatory, and so you can simply follow the steps. You will be describing the type of parent you want to be, the culture of home you will create, and even talk about your fears, doubts, and family patterns, both healthy and non-healthy, positive and negative. It's essential to this work that you don't sugarcoat anything. You'll be doing this initial work alone. In about an hour, we'll come together and go to the next step. Can you think of any questions before I send you out? Pam asked. I don't have any, volunteered Rory. Oh no, I'm fine too, said Jerry. Great. I'll be in the office, so feel free to wander in if something comes up that you don't understand. And I'll see you both back here at about 3 o'clock. She hugged each of them and sent them on their way. Pam smiled as she sat down at her desk. It was such fun to work with new parents, whether before conception, during pregnancy, or after the baby arrived. This focus on infants was a new part of her tag work, but so powerful. Although she appeared to be uninvolved, Pam knew that imbalancing energies in the unseen world could be attracted to any vulnerability from old memories. The presence of the imbalanced vibrations would sabotage the health and sovereignty that would otherwise benefit Rory and Jerry. She was constantly holding and broadcasting secured space of sacred energy as Jerry and Rory worked. Pam put on some soft music while Jerry and Rory went to find their place. She felt great reverence for these two as they searched their heart and soul for purpose and clarity. A journey of love had begun, and she knew that they fully intended to walk the path with maturity, honor, and integrity. Periodically, she wandered out to check on them. At first, they moved from place to place. Then Jerry found a spot in the back garden. She was now sitting on the grass, feet bare, with her shoes lined up neatly beside her. Pam noticed that she shifted from sitting to lying and then back to sitting. Rory began, deep in thought, at the table in the meeting room, and then carried his notebook to a corner bench down the hall from the main door. He sat still, at times deep in thought. Often his eyes were closed. Shortly before 2:30, Jerry knocked softly on the doorframe to Pam's office. I have a question, she said. What is it, Jerry? Well, on the section about family patterns, I wonder about my old pattern of distrusting men and the experience of being raped by Dean. Should I list that even though I feel complete with it? Yes, list anything you have noticed. We want to get as clear as possible. Better to heal too much than too little. If you assume past experiences are complete, you may miss some negative patterns. Then the old pattern would lie unseen under the new one and distort your new intentions. Okay, replied Jerry and went out to finish her assignment. At 3, Pam found Jerry in the garden and Rory on the front porch. Are you ready to come inside, she asked. They each nodded. Rory jotted down a few more notes and then walked inside. Well, that was quite an exercise, said Rory. It gave me the opportunity to think deeply about myself, my purpose in being a dad, and what I want to have in place for my son. I liked the process. It gave me a sense of participation and building for this one I love already. Well, we're just beginning, said Pam, and I'm glad you took the assignment seriously. How could you not? Asked Jerry. This is a sacred journey. I think so, said Pam. Now, You will share what you've written, and we'll move through one question at a time. While one person is sharing, the other's role is to simply listen, be present, and be open to feeling the impact of the words. Remember, there's no right or wrong. This is just sharing who you are and what you're offering this new family dynamic. Let's start with you, Rory, Pam said. What came up for you about your desire to be a dad? For the next hour, they were lost in the world of love, of dreams, of possibility.